For 8 years, Emily had been my wife. 8 years that I honestly believed were filled with a steady, good kind of love. We met back in college. She was all about art history, and I was focused on business. Right away, there was just this spark. I still picture her laughing at my corny jokes on our first coffee date, how her eyes would wrinkle up at the corners when she did. We built a whole life together, you know? Got ourselves a little house in a quiet neighborhood, adopted a golden retriever. We named him Max, and like any couple, we had our share of good times and tougher moments. But Emily betraying me like this? That was something I never saw coming. It all started subtly, real quiet. You always hear folks talk about the telltale signs, don't you? Coming home later and later from work, suddenly glued to her phone, giving you these kinda hazy answers about where she'd been or who she was with. I saw all of it, every single sign, but I talked myself out of it. Figured I was just being jumpy. Emily was working at an art gallery in the city, and she always did love her job, always had a real passion for it. So, when she started mentioning staying late for exhibitions or meeting with clients, I bought it. Why wouldn't I have? Then one night, maybe 3 months back, something just felt off in my stomach. She was on the couch, phone in hand, just giggling away. Old Max was right there beside her, head resting in her lap. I walked over, 2 glasses of that nice red wine we'd been saving in my hands, and she snapped that phone screen away from me so fast. "Just some silly meme," she said, letting out this nervous little laugh while taking the wine glass with her other hand. But quick as it was, I still caught a glimpse of a text message preview before she locked her screen up. It was from a number I didn't know, and there was a winking emoji in it. That was the first little crack in things, right there. I handed her the wine, and it felt like something inside me just went all empty and cold. It wasn't just the sneaking around that stung, it was how easily she lied. 8 years we'd been together, and she could look me square in the eye and just tell a lie like it was nothing. I didn't say anything to her then, not right away. Instead, I decided I was gonna watch, just see what was going on. Maybe it was just gut feeling, maybe it was just trying to protect myself, but I knew I had to play this smart. So, for the next few weeks, I really started paying attention. I noticed she'd be smiling at her phone late at night, started putting on nicer outfits for girls' nights, and always making sure her phone was face down any time I was around. "You seem miles away lately," she said one night while we were getting ready for bed. "Work stuff," I said, and I almost laughed out loud at how ridiculous that sounded, even to me. "Yeah, work stuff. Just thinking about that big client account." Another lie, just piling up on all the others building up between us. Truth was, that account had been done and closed for weeks. "Don't burn yourself out," she said, and kissed me real quick on the cheek before turning away from me. Then, one night, she was in the shower, and her phone buzzed there on the nightstand. Just a tiny buzz, for a split second, but that was all it took. My heart pounding in my chest, I reached over and grabbed it. Just a preview popped up on the screen. "Can't wait to see you this weekend. I'll make it worth your while." The name on the contact was just an A. I gently put the phone back down, walked right out of the bedroom, and just made myself take a deep breath. Outside, I could hear that early spring rain tapping against the windows. Max came trotting after me and nudged my hand with his wet nose, like he could somehow tell I was hurting inside. That was it, plain as day. The proof I really didn't want to find. The very next day, Saturday it was, Emily wasn't working, and she was just too happy, you know? Way too upbeat. She comes up with this idea about hitting the weekend market, something we hadn't done in ages and ages. "Let's make a whole day of it," she says, all bright-eyed. "Get some fresh stuff, maybe grab some brunch at that new place everyone's been talking about." I just went along with it, trying to hide how uneasy I felt inside. Walking around the market with her, Emily was all excited, pointing at the flowers, trying out cheeses, chatting with all the vendors. It was like she was putting on a show, trying way too hard to act like everything was normal, like she was overdoing it to cover something up. I kept waiting for her phone to buzz, or for her to accidentally let something slip, but she was being real careful. Too careful, almost. Brunch was at this trendy little cafe with outdoor seating. Emily ordered some fancy toast and a morning cocktail, all smiles. Me. I just got coffee, didn't have any appetite at all. While she's eating, she's making small talk, asking about my week, mentioning some funny thing that happened at the gallery. But her eyes, they just wouldn't quite meet mine, not really. Felt like I was talking to some actress just pretending to be my wife. Back at the house, Emily says she's heading out to meet the girls for happy hour. Jessica's going through a rough patch with Ryan, you know how it is, she says, grabbing her purse like it's no big deal. Jessica and Ryan had been split up for months already. Another lie, just rolling right off her tongue. Have fun, I said, and my voice just came out flat. She gives me a quick peck on the cheek. Don't wait up, and then she's out the door. I watched her from the window as she backed out of the driveway, watched her car disappear down the street. A wave of sick feeling just rolled right through me. It was like she was slowly, bit by bit, just peeling herself away from our whole life together. I went into the living room, and there's Max, asleep on the couch. I sat down beside him, just petting his soft fur, trying to get myself grounded in his warm solidness. Just us now, buddy, I whispered to him. He just opened one eye, gave a gentle thump of his tail against the cushions, and went right back to sleep. The house just felt cold and empty, even with all that spring sunshine pouring in through the windows. 8 years. 8 whole years. And suddenly it felt like I was living with somebody I didn't even know. I could have just blown up right there, demanded answers, started yelling and crying, all of it. But something inside just held me back. If she'd been lying to my face this entire time, what good would it do to give her a chance to just lie her way out of it again? I needed real proof, so that's what I set about getting. I checked our laptop, the one we both used, and found her cloud backups. Turns out, she'd forgotten to log out of her messages on there. A couple of clicks and my stomach just dropped right to the floor. Here's your text with geographic names, street names, car brands, and public establishments removed or reworded while keeping the meaning intact. The first thing I knew I had to do was get myself to a divorce lawyer. Found this woman named Victoria, real sharp eyes and just a no-nonsense way about her. I sat down and told her the whole story, laid out all the proof I had. You're taking this remarkably calmly, she says, looking up from reading through the printed-out text messages. What's the other option? I asked her. Just fall apart? Beg her to stay or something. She told me, straight up, I had a rock-solid case. And honestly, that's all I needed to hear right there. Next thing was untangling myself from all our shared money stuff. Bank accounts. I drained them and moved everything into a new account, just in my name. Left enough in the old account to cover the bills that'd be coming while she was gone, but not a penny more. Joint credit cards. Cancelled, every one of them. I called each company myself, explained to them I suspected fraud. Wasn't even really a lie, when you think about it. Had my paychecks start going into my personal account. Scheduled the house utilities to be shut off the day before she was due to get back. And she didn't notice any of it. She was way too busy sneaking around with this guy, too busy planning out their little getaway trip. I wondered sometimes if he even knew she was married, if he even cared. Wondered what he looked like, what kind of job he had, what made him so special that she'd do this. But those thoughts just led to dark places, so I shoved them right back down. Then I just started selling off whatever I could. The extra car, I took it to a dealer far enough away and sold it off. The high-end electronics, sold those online to some folks who didn't ask any questions, didn't care. Every little thing I'd bought with my own money, I packed it up, ready to go. Some nights I'd be lying there in bed next to her, just listening to her breathing steady and even, wondering if she was dreaming about him. Wondering if, deep down somewhere, she felt even a little bit guilty about all this. But then I'd remember those messages, he doesn't notice a thing, and that cold feeling would just come right back and wash over me. One evening, about a week before she was supposed to leave for her trip, She asks me if I could take Max to the kennel while she's gone. I've got that conference thing right after I get back, she explains. It'd be a huge help, really. Conference. Another lie, of course. There wasn't any conference, just more time with A. Sure, I said. No problem at all. But I had other plans for Max. He wasn't going to any kennel. He was coming with me, that was for sure. The one thing I did feel bad about was our friends. Folks who'd been part of our lives for years, who had no clue about any of this going on. Should I tell them? Give them a heads up? But I decided against it in the end. Let them find out when she does. Let her be the one to try and explain it all. By the time she was boarding her flight, I had every single piece in place, ready to go. The morning she left, I waited for her to text me from the airport. She sends the usual, "I'll miss you" message, acting like she wasn't about to go spend 2 weeks sleeping with some other guy. I just replied with a simple, "Have fun." And then I got down to business. That very night, I moved out. Got a buddy of mine, Brandon, someone who owed me a favor, to help with the heavy stuff, no questions asked. I took everything that actually mattered to me. Left behind just the things that would remind her of what she'd thrown away. Her art books, the pictures of us she'd framed all so carefully, all those anniversary gifts I'd given her over the years. Left them all behind. Just sitting there like pieces of some life that just didn't exist anymore. I took Max's bed, his toys, his food. Took the blanket my grandma had made for our wedding. Took all the rare vinyl records I'd been collecting since college. Left one single note sitting on the kitchen counter. I know everything. You can keep the memories. I took everything else. Then I just walked right out the door, locked it behind me, and never looked back even once. Those first few days of being free, it all felt unreal, you know? Like it wasn't quite happening. I rented myself a little apartment on the other side of town, month-to-month lease, furnished, just something temporary, nothing set in stone. Max, being a dog, just adjusted right away. He's happy as long as we're together, that's all he cares about. I kept waiting to feel something big, grief, anger, anything really, but I just stayed numb. Felt like this thick layer, protecting me from all the pain I knew was still waiting for me underneath. You gotta deal with this, my sister Olivia tells me on the phone. She's the only one in the family I'd told about any of it. You can't just shut down and pretend it's not happening. I'm not shutting down, I told her. I'm moving on, that's what I'm doing. But the truth of it was, I really couldn't feel much of anything at all. Not yet anyway. I took some time off work, told them it was a family emergency. Which, in a way, wasn't too far from the truth. My boss, real understanding but definitely curious, gave me 2 weeks off. I spent most of that time just walking Max in parks I'd never even been to before, sitting in coffee shops where nobody knew my name, and sleeping. Man, I slept so much. Felt like my body was just trying to make up for all the rest it had missed out on while I was lying there next to a liar all those months. The day Emily was supposed to get back from her trip, I just sat in my temporary living room, staring at my phone, waiting, not saying a word. I pictured her walking into our empty house, finding that note, finally realizing what had actually happened. I imagined her starting to panic, all confused at first, then it slowly dawning on her, the understanding. And then I knew her call would come. Or a text. Or maybe she'd even show up at my office. The phone rang at 8:47 p.m. What the hell is going on here? Her voice was all shaky, out of breath. Where are you? Where's all our stuff? Our stuff, she says, like we still even shared anything anymore. I told you in the note, I said, and my voice just surprised me, how calm it sounded. I know everything, Emily. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, what are you even talking about? The denial. I'd known it was coming, but it still stung to hear it. After everything, she was still trying to play the innocent act. I know about, I said, just laid it all out there. I know about all the texts, the hotels, everything. I know that trip wasn't with Lauren. I know you've been lying to me for over a year now. I hear her suck in a breath real sharp. I can explain. Don't. The word just came out sharper and louder than I even meant it to. Max lifted his head up from his bed, looking at me all worried. Don't insult me by telling me even more lies. It's over, Emily. I already filed for divorce. Work became the one place I could actually find some peace, some kind of escape. I just buried myself in projects, started staying late at the office all the time, even coming in early most days. My coworkers, they definitely noticed I was acting different, but they just figured I was really focused on moving up in the company, not that I was actually just trying to outrun my own misery. Only my buddy Brandon, the one who'd helped me move all my stuff, he knew the real deal. You gotta let yourself feel all this, he tells me one night when we're out having a drink. You're going around acting like some kind of robot. What's there to feel, though? I asked him back. She cheated on me, I left her, end of the story, right? But it wasn't the end, not really. Not even close. Emily somehow tracked down my sister's number, started calling Olivia, begging her to tell her where I was, how I was doing, everything. She's a wreck, Olivia told me about 3 weeks after I'd moved out. Says she made a huge mistake, wants to explain everything to you. There's just nothing to explain, I said, but even as I said it, I felt something inside me crack a little. Just a tiny flicker of something. Maybe anger, maybe sadness, starting to break through that numbness I'd been holding onto so tight. That night, I had a dream about Emily, about way back in the beginning when things were easy and good. I woke up with tears actually on my face and this just empty, aching feeling right in my chest. That numbness was starting to fade away, and what was coming up in its place was worse. A whole lot worse. I started getting these panic attacks, out of nowhere. The first one hit me right in the middle of a work presentation. 1 minute I'm up there talking about quarterly numbers, the next minute I just couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight, couldn't do anything but feel like the walls were just closing in all around me. I told everyone it was just low blood sugar, and nobody questioned it. Back at my apartment, I finally let myself look through our wedding photos, at Emily smiling there next to me, her face just full of promises she was always going to break. Had she ever really loved me at all? Or was I just convenient, dependable, boring maybe? The thoughts just started spinning around and around in my head. Night after night, I'd just lie awake in bed, playing back different moments from our marriage, trying to find clues I'd missed, little signs I'd just ignored at the time. You need to get some help, man, Brandon said to me one day after he found me standing in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, and I couldn't even remember why I'd gotten out of bed in the first place. This isn't good for you, not healthy at all. He was right, plain as day. I was really starting to fall apart. The very next day, I looked up therapists and found Dr. Patel. She had these kind eyes, and this real straightforward way of talking that reminded me, in a painful way, of my own mother. Tell me what's been going on, she says to me in our first session. So I did. I told her everything. Finding out, making the plan, leaving, and then just feeling completely empty afterward. You're grieving, she said to me when I was done talking. And it's not just the marriage ending, but you're grieving for who you thought your wife was, for the future you thought you were building together. I hadn't really thought of it like grief before, but she was absolutely right. I was mourning something that had died a long time ago, way before I ever found those text messages. How do I get through this? I asked her. How do I get past it? Not by running away from it, she said, real gently, and not by pretending like it doesn't hurt. It was the first truly honest conversation I'd had with anyone since all of this started. The first time I'd even admitted to myself that underneath all the coldness, underneath all the careful planning and the clean break, there was just this raw pain, so much pain. I loved her, I said, my voice just cracking right there. God, I really loved her so much. And then, finally, after weeks and weeks of feeling nothing at all, I finally just started to cry. Grief, I was learning, it's not something that just goes in a straight line. It comes and goes in waves, just hits you sometimes with this breathtaking pain, and then you get these stretches where things feel almost normal again. Some days, I could go for hours without even thinking about Emily. Then other days, just the smallest little thing. A song comes on the radio, seeing some couple walking down the street holding hands, catching a whiff of her perfume on some stranger passing by, and boom, I'd be right back in that empty, hollow place again. Dr. Patel, she became my anchor through all of it. Once a week, I'd go sit in her office and we'd just unpack another layer of my whole marriage falling apart. Looking back now, she asked me during our third session, were there any signs? Do you see them now? I really thought about it. Thought about how Emily had started to pull away from me over the last couple of years, how our talks had just become surface level, just going through the motions, how we weren't really intimate anymore. Not like we used to be. How she'd started taking those weekend art classes. Classes that I was now pretty sure had never even existed at all. Yeah, I admitted to Dr. Patel. There were signs for sure. But I guess I chose not to see them. I was too comfortable, too complacent. That doesn't make what she did your fault, Dr. Patel said, real firm. Doesn't it though? I asked her. If I'd been paying more attention, been more exciting maybe. Stop right there, she said, her voice still gentle, but firm. Emily made her own choices. She chose to lie to you, to cheat on you, instead of just talking to you about what she needed, or just ending the relationship honestly. Those were her choices, not yours. I knew in my head that she was right about all of it. But down in my gut, in my heart, it was just so much harder to really accept it. Meanwhile, Emily, she just kept on trying to get to me. When changing my phone number didn't work, she started sending emails. And when I blocked her emails, she started sending actual letters to my office, each one more desperate than the last. Victoria, my lawyer, she kept me in the loop on how the divorce was coming along. Turns out Emily was fighting it, trying to drag things out. She's claiming abandonment, Victoria tells me in a phone call one day. Says you just left without any warning, that she had no idea why. I just laughed. This real bitter sound. I left all the proof sitting right there on the kitchen counter for her. So, she is admitting to the affair then? Victoria asks. Yeah, but she says it was just a mistake, and that she's ended it now. Victoria's voice was just neutral, professional as always. She says she wants to try and reconcile. Just the thought of that made my stomach just turn right over. Absolutely not happening. Even with Emily trying to fight it every step of the way, the divorce kept moving forward, step by step. 6 months after I moved out, I saw her in person for the first time since then. Nathan, hello, Emily said, real soft, as I walked into the conference room. I just gave her a nod, didn't trust myself to actually say anything out loud just then. Her lawyer, this slick-looking guy in a fancy suit, did most of the talking, going over the assets, the property, the timelines for the divorce. I just let Victoria, my lawyer, handle all of it. I was too focused on trying to keep my breathing even and steady, trying to keep my face from showing anything, until Emily just cut right in. This is just ridiculous, she says, her voice starting to crack right there. We shouldn't be doing this through lawyers. Nathan, please, can't we just talk? Just the two of us. I looked over at her, really looked at her for the first time in a long time. This was the woman I had pictured growing old with, the woman I'd shared my bed, my name, my entire life with. The woman who had just thrown all of it completely away. We don't have anything left to talk about, I said, and I was even surprised myself at how calm and steady my voice sounded. I broke things off with Adam, she says real quick, right after you left. I realized what a terrible, awful mistake I'd made. Adam, I stopped her right there, repeating the name. So, that was who a was. Actually having a full name to put with the betrayal, it was strange, almost like it let all the air out of it. Not some mysterious guy, just a man. Just a guy named Adam who'd helped wreck my marriage. Yes, Emily goes on, and I could see this little spark of hope flicker in her eyes. It was never really serious, Nathan. It was just stupid and selfish, and honestly, the biggest regret of my entire life. Her lawyer suddenly looked real uncomfortable. Victoria just put a hand on my arm, like a little warning. Never serious? I repeated her words, kind of flat. A year-long affair, and that wasn't serious? Emily actually flinched a little. It wasn't. It started as, I was unhappy and instead of talking to me about it, instead of suggesting we go to counseling, or just being honest and filing for divorce like a grown-up, you decided to just lie and sneak around, to make me feel like I was losing my mind for even suspecting something was wrong. My voice started getting louder with every word, and I could feel that calm mask I'd been holding up just start to crack and crumble. You looked me straight in the eye every single day and just lied to me. Nathan, please, no. I just stood up right then. I don't want to hear it, Emily. I don't care about why you did it, or if you regret it now, and I definitely don't care if you ended it, or not. It's just way too late. We're done here. And I just walked right out of there, ignoring Victoria calling after me to come back, ignoring Emily's tears. I just kept walking until I got to my car, then I just sat there for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel, just trying to breathe through this tight knot that had formed up in my chest. That night, I told Dr. Patel all about that meeting. How did it make you feel, seeing her face to face like that? She asked me. Angry, I said right away. And sad. And confused, I guess. Confused about what exactly? I hesitated a second before answering. Just confused about whether I'm even doing the right thing here. Whether I should at least hear her out, you know? Dr. Patel leaned forward a little. What do you think actually talking to her would accomplish, Nathan? I don't know. Maybe some kind of closure, or something? Do you honestly believe there's any explanation she could possibly give you that would make what happened okay? No, I admitted. But maybe understanding why she did it would help me to finally move on from all of this. Dr. Patel nodded, thoughtful-like. It's possible, Nathan. Or it's also possible that it would just open up wounds that are finally starting to heal over. Only you can really decide if you're ready for that kind of conversation, or not. I knew I wasn't ready, not yet anyway. But for the first time since I'd walked out of that house, I let myself think about the possibility that maybe, someday down the road, I actually might be. The real work of rebuilding wasn't about Emily, never about her. It was about me. About facing what had really happened, facing the future stretched out in front of me. Just me, alone. 8 months after I walked out that door, the divorce was finally, officially done. No more of those mediation meetings, no more stacks of legal papers, no more fighting back and forth over the leftovers of the life we used to share. It was just over. And I felt it, like a real physical thing. Lighter. Like some heavy weight I'd been carrying around for years, and not just since I found out about the affair, had finally been lifted off my shoulders. Dr. Patel, she even noticed it too. You seem different today, Nathan, she says to me as I'm settling into my usual chair in her office. I think I am, I told her, and as I said it, I realized it was true. I feel like I can actually breathe again, for the first time in a long time. That night, I did something I hadn't done even once since before all the cheating stuff started. I actually went out. Not to some loud bar or a club scene, but to an event at a bookstore. Brandon had asked me to go with him to a poetry reading. Not really my kind of thing usually, but I was trying to make an effort to say yes to stuff, to actually start engaging with life again. The poet was this woman, maybe in her 50s, with silver hair and this voice that was just melodic, you know? She read these poems about loss, about starting over, about finding something beautiful even in things that are broken. I sat way in the back, just letting her words wash over me, and I was surprised how much they actually hit home. Afterwards, During that part where everyone just kind of mingles around and makes small talk, which I usually avoid like the plague, this woman walks up to me. Tall, curly dark hair, glasses on, holding a copy of the poet's book. "First time here?" she asks me with this friendly smile. Was it that obvious I was out of my element? She laughed a little. "You just had that dragged here by a friend look about you." Her name was Hannah. Turns out she was a high school English teacher, loved poetry, and couldn't stand small talk either. We ended up just talking and talking until the bookstore finally closed up for the night, and then we even kept talking at a little cafe nearby. Not about Emily, or the divorce, none of that. We talked about books, movies, places we traveled to, our favorite foods. Just normal stuff, human stuff, you know? I didn't even think about asking for her number. It was still too soon, that wound was still way too fresh. But as we were saying goodbye for the night, she said something that just kind of stuck with me. "Whatever it was that brought you here tonight, Nathan," she said, "I'm really glad it did." 2 years to the day after I walked out of our old place with nothing but a goodbye note and whatever I could carry, I found myself driving back to the neighborhood we used to call home. The house had been sold off months ago to some young family, but I still felt this pull to go back there, to that life I used to have within those walls. I parked across the street and just watched as a woman, must have been the new owner I figured, was out in the front yard, gardening away. She was planting flowers, big bright ones, right where Emily had always insisted on just having these neat, boring shrubs. You know what? It actually looked way better, more alive and welcoming. Just checking up on the old place? I turned around, kind of startled. And there was Emily, standing just a few feet away from me, looking different. Her hair was shorter now, and she was dressed more casually than all those stylish outfits she used to wear when we were married. But her eyes, those were still the same. Those eyes that used to be my whole world, once upon a time. "What are you even doing here, Emily?" I asked her, and my voice just came out rough. She just shrugged and stepped a little closer to me. "Same thing as you, I guess. Just remembering things." I tensed up right away, ready to just turn around and leave, but something made me freeze in place. Maybe it was that need for some kind of real closure, maybe it was just plain old curiosity finally getting the better of me. How are you doing, Emily?" I asked, real formal, like we were just folks who just met, not like we were people who'd promised each other forever, once. "Better," she said. "Not exactly great, but better. I'm in therapy now, you know. Trying to learn how to be honest with myself, mostly." She paused for a second. "What about you, Nathan?" "I'm good," I said, and surprised myself by realizing it was actually the truth. "Yeah, I'm good." Then this awkward silence just dropped between us. There was just so much we could say to each other, but at the same time, nothing left that felt like it was even worth saying out loud anymore. "I read your note," she said finally, breaking the quiet. "Every single day, for months after you left. Just trying to understand how I could have been so unbelievably stupid, so selfish." I didn't say anything back to that. What could I even say? "I'm not asking you to forgive me, Nathan," she went on. "I know I don't deserve it. But I just want you to know. I really am sorry. Truly sorry. And not just for the cheating, but for just failing you. For failing both of us." I just looked at her, at this woman I really thought I had known better than anyone else in the world, or at least, who I thought I had. "Why, Emily?" I finally asked her, asking the question that had been running around in my head for years now. Why him? Why risk just everything we had? She didn't answer me right away, and I was actually grateful for that pause. A too quick answer would have just sounded fake, like she'd rehearsed it a million times. "It wasn't really about him," she said finally. "It was about me, I guess. All my own insecurities, all my stupid fears. I felt like I was trapped, but not by you, Nathan. I was trapped by who I thought I was supposed to be, you know? The perfect wife, the successful career woman, all of it. I felt like I was just drowning, and instead of just reaching out to you, reaching for your hand to help pull me out, I just set fire to the whole damn boat. It was honestly the most honest thing I think she had ever actually said to me. I would have helped you, Emily, I said, real soft. If you just talked to me. Just told me. I know, she whispered back. And that's what makes it so unforgivable, I guess. We just stood there for a while, just two strangers standing in front of each other, with this whole tangled past stretched out between us. Just watching as the new owner of our old house called out to her kids, and they came running out from the backyard, full of life and laughter. This whole other life, a life we could have had, maybe, in some other world, some universe where trust hadn't gotten completely broken. I should probably get going, Emily said finally. I really wanted to say I was sorry, and that I really do hope you're happy now, Nathan. You really deserve to be. And as she turned around to walk away, I just felt this sudden sense of release, like the very last little thread that was still connecting us had finally just snapped completely. Emily, I called out to her. She looked back at me, and for just a second, I saw this little flicker of hope, maybe, in her eyes. I forgive you, Emily, I said. And I knew as soon as the words were out of my mouth, I hadn't said them for her. I said them for me. Because holding on to all that anger and bitterness, it was just exhausting. And I was finally just ready to let it all go. Tears welled up in her eyes right then, but she just nodded once, just this small, quiet nod, and then she turned and walked away. I didn't watch her go this time. Instead, I just got back in my car and drove myself home. My real home now. Not that old house we used to share, but my apartment, the place where Max was always waiting for me with those excited barks and wagging tail. Where my guitar was always sitting there in the corner, waiting to be played again. Where all the pictures up on the walls were pictures of my new life, the one I was building now, piece by piece. That night, I called Hannah up. We'd kept in touch ever since that poetry reading, just taking things slow, building this new friendship that had the real promise of maybe turning into something more, someday, when we were both really ready for it. Dinner next week? I asked her. I would really like that, Nathan, she said, and I could actually hear the smile right there in her voice, over the phone. Later that night, with Max curled up right beside me there on the couch, I just sat there for a while, just thinking about this whole long journey of the last 2 years. All the pain, all the growth, I guess, all the rebuilding I'd had to do. I thought about Emily, about forgiveness, about second chances. Not with her, not ever again with her, but with life itself. I had finally, truly moved on. And for the first time in a long time, I just knew, deep down, I was never going to look back.